guys, and welcome on back to She's Diabetic. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrea. I have been a type 1 diabetic for over 19 years, and this is just a channel all about that, my life with type 1 diabetes, tips, tricks, mostly just my personal experience with the condition, living with a chronic illness. So for those of you who are new here, welcome. So glad to have you joining us. And for those of you who are returning, welcome back. So I'm going to get straight into the video because we have a lot of cues and I'm going to give my best A's possible. I asked over on my Instagram, if I were to do a Q&A, what questions would you ask? And you guys gave me awesome questions. You always do, but you really turned out in droves here on this one, and I am so honored and I so appreciate your asking these questions. These are my favorite videos. I've done one previously, which I'll link up above. That was a couple months ago, but really they're my favorite because I get to really converse with you guys and know exactly what you're wondering in that moment in your life with type 1 diabetes. And I feel like it's the most collaborative I can possibly get with a huge group of people. And you guys are just amazing, and you just ask smart, interesting, great questions. So thank you for that. And by the way, if you didn't see your question here, it means I answered it in my low carb, what I eat in a day video. I answered, I think 3, maybe 4 questions there. So if you don't see your question answered here, it's been answered in that other video. I did a very short Q&A section in that video because I thought it'd be interesting to pepper a few through in there. Make sure to check that out if you're looking for your question and it hasn't been answered here. All right, first up, Highlands A Squatch asks, how accurate have your carb counting estimates been based on BGs after eating? Great question. Carb counting, oh boy, what an adventure. It's hit and miss. I think carb counting, I try to be as accurate as possible. I use the Carbs Cals app when I don't have a nutrition label, and that sort of helps me build out a rough carbohydrate content for, say, a plate of potatoes or something that doesn't nutritionally speak for itself through nutrition label. I feel pretty good about my boluses, but there's always those times where 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4 in type 1 diabetes. So how accurate am I? I try to be as accurate as possible. Post-meal blood sugars are pretty good. I'm pretty happy with them. But yeah, it's a constant guessing game. Danny Mahoney 1 asks, now Danny is my very good friend, and oh my goodness, I adore him so much. So hi, Danny. He is not a type 1 diabetic in the slightest, but he is so supportive of me and my type 1, this channel, and just very interactive and inquisitive about type 1 diabetes. So I hope you guys have friends like this, and I hope you know that there are people watching this channel that aren't even type 1, they're just interested, and that I think should be so encouraging to us. So thank you, Danny. Your question asks, how does alcohol affect your levels? I get a few questions about alcohol in this Q&A. I am not a big drinker, so I can't speak with any sort of authority on this from a I've put it into practice perspective, but I can say that alcohol tends to bring your blood sugar down. So, and especially with a delayed reaction after the fact. So when I'm drinking, I always make sure I'm having a meal or a really good healthy snack or something like that that's going to keep my levels balanced out. Now, if you're really going on a bender, and again, this is not something I have done very much of, but I've noticed that about 24 hours after, I have personally experienced a low trending blood sugar. So you have to be really careful when you drink as a type 1 diabetic, or from my perspective, this is what I've experienced, in that alcohol is going to trend your blood sugar down. It has something to do with the liver and absorption of some glucose, something or other. I don't know the technical for it. I just know that I've been advised by doctors and I've experienced personally that when I drink, my blood sugar tends to trend downwards. And so I need to make sure I'm having regular snacks, maybe even a sugar mixer with a drink, that kind of thing. I don't tend to drink because I'm not like the biggest drinker, not that I have anything against it, but it is complicated with type 1 diabetes, which makes it somewhat less appealing. I think a lot of people drink to sort of let loose, and for diabetics it tends to be that you have to tighten up when you drink. You can't really let loose because there's consequences on the other side, and blood sugars that need to be balanced and everything like that. And especially dangerous, I have to get serious here for a minute, in that you could drink and lose control of your sort of sense of self and sense of control over your blood sugars, and that can sometimes be a dangerous scenario. Sometimes low blood sugar can be mistaken for drunkenness, confusion, not making sense, that kind of thing. And I have heard some kind of scarier stories where people were passed off as, oh, just being drunk, when actually they were low and they were exhibiting those symptoms. So it's something very much to consider, but when I'm drinking, I'm always combining it with food or sugar mixers and really keeping a close eye on my blood sugar because it trends it downwards. And my friends are really coming out in this one because I have another question from Bohemian Zoe, who is my gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous friend, Yasmin, or Zoe. So thank you. Again, not a diabetic. How cool is it that I have these friends and that these people are here to support us and take an interest in our diabetes, even though they're not type 1 diabetic. It just blows my mind how lucky, and thank you. Okay, so you ask, do you eat everything within your quote diet in moderation? If so, how do you keep control? Now, this is an awesome question because it really touches on something here that I think as type 1 diabetics, we are always, it's about control. It's about control of your blood sugars, control of your carbs, or whatever. It feels like applying that control is the best chance at us living a healthy life, which I think in so many regards is absolutely accurate. But at the same time, that sense of control can get really suffocating and can infringe upon our emotional well-being. So do I eat everything in my diet within moderation? Yes. I pretty much don't try to eliminate anything out of my diet per se. I don't eat gluten because I'm celiac. Other than that, yes, I really try to eat things in moderation. Whenever anyone who knows me knows, I like to have like corners of things and nibbles of things. I've been called the bird or the mouse before because I go into a kitchen and it's like, oh, Andrea's been in there, because it's just like a corner of something taken off. Sometimes I just search out that bite of something that I know if I ate the whole thing would be relatively difficult to deal with my diabetes with, either bolusing or the taking of insulin. But I try to give myself access to anything I want. Yeah, maybe I want to eat a whole pan of brownies, but what's going to be easiest for me to bolus for is a half a brownie or a quarter of a brownie. Not that I'm saying you can't have a whole brownie, but you know, if I just fancy a bit of something, I'm just going to go ahead and have a bit of something, but in moderation. And how do I keep control? It's that balancing act. So if I'm not having a whole pan of brownies, but only having a bit of a brownie or whatever, then I'm going to be more likely to be able to stabilize and remain in control, because that's what I'm used to doing, and because I sort of have considered that whole picture with my diabetes in mind. So I hope that makes sense. There's a few more questions on this later on, but yeah, I hope that makes sense. It gives you an idea. Okay, next up, Manal_Asiri1413, which I know you've asked questions before, so thank you for that, and thank you for asking more. You ask, is it difficult to be a vegan and gluten-free with diabetes? So I have been vegan in the past. I am no longer vegan. I am just gluten-free. I came off of being vegan because I was battling some pretty serious stomach issues that were affecting my everyday life. So I am no longer vegan, just gluten-free. But is it difficult to do that? Yes, I've been there, I've done that. It's not as difficult as you think. I live in a big city, I live in London, so a lot of the restaurants cater to that kind of thing, let's be honest. When I'm visiting my family in Michigan, which is where I am right now, that can be a little bit more difficult, but it's not impossible. It's a further restriction that can make things difficult when us as type 1 diabetics already have some restrictions put upon us. But I am very much of the mindset that whatever feels good to you and whatever makes the most sense diabetes-wise can be achieved. If you really want to be a vegan and you really want to be gluten-free, and that in combination makes you happy, and that's how you want to eat, well then I think it's absolutely doable. I don't think it's impossible at all. You might have to consider cooking more for yourself, pre-planning, bringing snacks along with you, that sort of thing, but nothing is out of the realms of possibility. Har_Vey, it's just fun to say, asks, my sugars go high after eating a carb-free meal. How do you calculate for veg that might be slightly sugary? Great question. So, blood sugar's going high after eating a carb-free meal. Some things to just throw out there and consider. Are you eating a high-fat, low-carb meal? And therefore, is the fat sort of slowly releasing and pushing your blood sugar up, which fat tends to do, at least for me? How do you calculate the carbs in veg? I use an app called Carbs Cals, which I've spoken about earlier already. It's a great app that you can just plug in the food that you're having and get the carb content. Some vegetables are higher in sugars or carbs than we think. I think a lot of us are taught vegetables are relatively a free food, and a lot of them are, but a lot of them contain carbs. So those have to be accounted for. And like for me, I know eating carrots sometimes really shoots my blood sugar up. And they're not technically a high carb vegetable, but that's just how they play with my physiology. So a little trial and error, looking veg up on the Carbs Cals app or Google or wherever, and thinking about if you have a lot of fat in your meal, then that's going to delay the release and possibly give you a bit of a climb in your blood sugar. Speaking of high fat, I got a lot of questions about keto. Kenzo_yay asks, what do you think about keto? Holly Collies 233 asks, have you ever tried keto? Do you eat a low carb diet? Have you ever done keto or very low carb? How do you find it? Did you find it any drawbacks? What is your opinion about low carb, high fat diet? Do you give yourself a carb limit per meal or per day? Am I sensing a theme or what? Keto, low carb, high fat, these are all things that are very, very, very much in our world, and especially as type 1 diabetics. Now, I will be honest with you. I have of late been doing more of a keto eating style. So I can speak to this somewhat, but I have to preface this all by saying it's just something I'm trying out and it has been working well for me, but that is not to say that it will work well for you or is the diet that diabetics should eat. I am never, ever, ever going to be one of those people that comes on and says you should eat this and you should eat that, and then your diabetes is going to be just great. It's just such a personal choice, and I really, really ask that you empower yourselves to know that you are going to know what's best for you. But on the other side of that, I understand people being curious and wanting to know how other people are eating and how it's affecting them. So in October, I saw a doctor. I've been having lots and lots and lots of stomach problems, to be honest with you. A lot of it started when I was living in Morocco last year, not 2020, 2019. And I've just been battling pretty bad horrendous issues. And a doctor suggested that there might be some SIBO that I was battling and that I might consider limiting my carbohydrates to starve out that bad bacteria. Now, I'm no expert, and I'm not saying this is how you treat SIBO or stomach issues. I just really want to say that. But this is a suggestion she made, and to be quite honest, I was in such a bad way, I sort of thought, well, I will try anything. So I started eating keto. I was hitting, she suggested around the 30 grams of carbohydrate per day. I found that very, very difficult to maintain because I'd be honest, I'm really a carb fiend. So that was a real adjustment. However, that being said, the blood sugars, eating that way, have been pretty primo for me. I have seen a lot of stabilization in my numbers, personally. I noticed two things. My numbers were more stable after meals, and because I was taking less insulin with meals, I was having less instances and have been having less instances of lows post-meal, which have been quite welcome. And I have also been feeling more satisfied and full. Now, I did keto several years ago and had a horrendous experience. I can't express to you how bad it was. I didn't feel good. And to be honest, it was kind of, it felt like it had an emotional stranglehold on me. So I was really in a desperate place to be willing to try that again. And I also came at it from a very different mindset of, well, we'll just see what happens, rather than I am going to do this thing, you know? It was a very, very different mindset I came at it with. And also at the time I was eating dairy, so I was doing a lot of milk and cheese, a lot of cheese, and I don't know that that agreed with my body. Whereas this time around, I haven't been doing any cheese. I don't really eat dairy. I've been doing, like, you know, coconut yogurt and lots of fish and avocado and very healthy, kind of naturally occurring fats, I guess you could say. Not that cheese isn't naturally occurring, but I just think the dairy didn't work for me. So those are kind of my thoughts. It's an ongoing thing. If you'd like me to make more of a video about this standalone, I totally can. I'm just very conscious that a lot of people watch this channel and are looking for community and understanding, and, or at least I think this, and just trying to see what other people are doing. And the last thing I want to do is make a video that says, this is what I'm doing, and get a load of people on board and it doesn't work for them. It's very possible that could happen. You could try keto and it might not work for you. And what I fear would happen is that people might try it, it might not work for them, or you might not feel good doing it. And then it's like, you sort of feel like you have to continue because you've heard other people say this is so good. And that the first time around when I did keto, I really struggled with that. It's like I didn't want to give up. I was like, yeah, I feel really bad, but like I'm in this and I'm doing it and this is what I'm doing. I'm quite like that. When I start something, when I get my mind onto something, I'm gonna continue doing it. Like, I'm persistent. Which is great in so many ways, but not when it's at the detriment of your emotional health and your social life. So here's my rant on keto. That's what I think about it. Great question, totally warranted question. I'm glad I spoke to you guys about my experience with it so far. I don't know if I'll continue doing it. I'm gonna see how my stomach issues fare, but it has been very good for my stomach. So I'm excited about it, but that being said, I don't beat myself up when I go over, you know, whatever, 40, 45 grams of carb a day. Life is way too short for that. And yeah. And following on from that, Madison Platt _18 asks, do you have any carb count number you try to keep? I guess I'm sort of thinking right now around like the 30 to 45 gram carb route with lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of good healthy fat in there, because otherwise you will be starving. But that being said, I'm not obsessive about it. I have way too many battles with numbers every day, looking at my Dexcom, looking to dose insulin. I have so many numbers, and then I think we all have so many numbers that we have to consider in our lives with diabetes. So I am not totally prescriptive about that for myself, and I do not beat myself up when I go over that or give myself a high five if I go under that. It's really just kind of in my mind, but it's not something that I'm obsessive about, because I know for myself when it moves into that obsessive territory, it's really not good, and it's just, it really infringes upon like your happiness in life, and that is number one. I always say in the end of my videos, keep a happy, healthy mind with it all, and I genuinely mean that. So, Type1.Jen asks, do you subtract fiber from all your foods, or how do you go about fiber? Okay, so a lot of people will take the carb count and they'll minus the fiber, and that is the net carbs that they will then bolus for or take insulin for. That's what you're referring to there, Jen, I think. Do I do that? Yes. Was I taught to do that initially? No. It's something that I'm sort of getting to grips with still, and a lot of things that are fibrous, like vegetables and things like that, they don't come with a smack dab nutrition label. If only you could whip out a carrot and it had a little nutrition label on there. That would be awesome. But that's why I say I do try to do this, but I am not great at doing it. But yes, I do it, and I'm trying to be better at it. Jen also asks, the carb counts to it all. What foods hold you over better for exercising? What are you eating or drinking? So, okay, exercising, I either do one of two things pretty much. I either exercise first thing in the morning, fasted on an empty stomach. I make sure when I start my exercise, my blood sugar's around 120, that kind of range, and I might even disconnect my pump. I'm gonna link a whole video that I've done about exercising and type 1 diabetes, both a Q&A and I did a vlog where I actually show you in the moment what I'm doing and where my thought process is, because this stuff is so hard to explain. So please, 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 if you're interested, watch that video, because I have tried to really go into depth of my thought process. So I'll either do fasted, or I will have, right now I am loving these protein bars called Nugo protein bars. They don't have any artificial sweeteners in them. They're like 6 net carbs type of thing. I will have like maybe half of one of those with a very small amount of insulin, you know, kind of under bolusing for it, and that'll see me through my workout. And I don't really spike from that either. So those have been a real key, and I talk about it in my vlog. Again, another one I'll link up above, but in my low carb what I eat in a day vlog, I talk more in depth about that. But those have been a nice addition where I can actually eat something and not go low during a workout, which is, it takes a lot of trial and error to find that sweet spot. But once you find it, it's very doable. So persistence in finding that. I promise you will learn your body and you will know what works, but it'll be a lot of trial and error. Keep glucose tablets on hand is what I always say. A couple of really, really beautiful and considered questions here from Cheryl S. Elliott, or Cheryl Elliott. First of all, you ask, how long did it take you after diagnosis before diabetes took up less headspace? And how do you make peace with less than ideal blood sugars when you've done everything right? I could cry reading those questions, because this is something that is so at the core of us, right? Diabetes takes up so much and can take up so much headspace, and sometimes, like, it's like I say all the time, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, and you can start blaming yourself and feel really bad. So thank you for those questions. How long did it take? I would say diabetes, for me personally, has only recently taken up less headspace in my mind. Now, I don't want that to sound like, hey, just hit the 19-year mark and you'll be good to go. That's not what I'm saying. But for me, I battled a lot. When I was first diagnosed, I went through periods of almost ignoring my diabetes, railing against it, denying it. Then I would go through times where I was really obsessive about it. So both of those taking up headspace in different ways. A lot of times the headspace that it takes up for me is quite closely related to where I'm at in my life. If I'm happy, if I'm relaxed, if I'm at peace with what's going on in my life outside of diabetes, my diabetes is going to more or less mimic and follow suit. If I am really anxious about things and stressed about the future, about what's going on in my life, if I'm unhappy, if I want to be somewhere different, or you know when you get those feelings, my diabetes has again followed suit and mimicked that. I think I've said in this video already, I'm quite a persistent person. I'm very persistent. I am almost to the point of obsessive with certain things, and that has served me very well in so much of my life. But in the diabetic sense, it served me well from a perspective of I'm persistent for those good numbers, and I expect that of myself, and I will continually go after it. But sometimes that's at the detriment, it has been at the detriment of my mental health. For me, it's come in ebbs and flows. I also recently lost my dad, and he was a type 1 diabetic, and he just had a great attitude about life with type 1 diabetes, and he was very relaxed and at peace with things. And he was a type 1 diabetic for over 60 years, and I, since losing him, have really thought more about how I want to live my life from a diabetic perspective, from an everything perspective, but especially from a diabetic perspective, because he just was at peace. He wasn't trying to stranglehold a control of his blood sugar, which I feel like I've been trying to do for a long time, and I still try to do it very often. But you know, I just have a persistent perfectionist in that way, and it hasn't served my emotional state well. And I sort of think in the last 6 months, especially over COVID and everything, it's like I'm trying to just be more grateful for what I have in this moment. And if that isn't perfect, it's okay. So really recently, my headspace has opened up for me in a different way. Now, to get away from the emotional side for a minute, there are things that you can do on a practical sense that open your headspace up for other things. Getting a CGM really helped me. When I started on my Dexcom, I suddenly felt like I could forget about my diabetes, because if something really went off course, I was going to get an alarm. So I didn't need to think about it as much. Huge game changer. I know that's not within everyone's budget, so I don't want to say that's the only way, but that was something that gave me a lot of headspace and is worth looking into. Also, just practical things. Always making sure my glucose tablet tubes are filled and populating every purse I own, so I'm never without glucose tablets. Making sure I have a grab-and-go bag, so if anything goes wrong and I'm bopping around the city and I come up against an issue and have to change an insulin pump site or anything like that, I've got the stuff with me. Didn't even need to think about it, because I've already got that bag that comes with me all the time. Those type of things have opened up headspace for me. How do I make peace with less than good blood sugars when I've done everything right? I think these two questions really go hand in hand. I used to have a real fear of going high, so I would more often than not take insulin more than I needed to, just to avoid those highs, and end up going low. I was talking to my diabetic nurse about this, and she could see there was an issue there. And immediately she introduced that concept to me in an appointment, and she said, are you kind of like obsessive about this? You're kind of like obsessed about not going high? And it hit me so much, like, what are you talking about? I was so embarrassed that she had seen right to the core of something that really freaked me out, that it really got to me. I was really kind of like emotional, but also a bit like angry, and I closed off and I said, no, that's not, like, no, what, no, you know, I just have a lot going on in my life, and I tried to pass it off onto other things. She referred me to a psychologist that I had 6 sessions with, where we worked through kind of withstanding those uncomfortable numbers. I had no idea what to expect when I went to this fellow, but he really helped me a great deal. Like, for example, I assigned like almost an emotional attachment with the numbers. Like, for me, 120 was okay, but like 150 was bad, 200 was really bad. So he kind of challenged me some weeks to stay more in that 150 range, just as an exercise. He wasn't telling me to let go of my trying to pursue good control, but he was encouraging me to kind of push those boundaries of discomfort that were, quite frankly, based on nothing. I just decided that number was good and this number was bad, and that's how I was going to run my life. So kind of working to divorce your emotions from the numbers is something that he worked with me a lot on, and that has helped me immensely in accepting less than ideal blood sugars, especially when you've done everything right. I think really we have to be reminded continuously that 2 + 2 does not equal 4 in this condition, and it's really frustrating. But just acknowledging that is somewhat of half the battle. Just going like, it's not always going to work out, and that's okay. And I think in a weird way, when you say that and you give yourself that grace for room for error, and don't stranglehold the expectation of yourself to always be perfect, then it opens up a huge amount of freedom and thus better blood sugars. Again, just my experience, not to be confused with fact, but I hope that helps in a small way. I don't know if you've been recently diagnosed, but know that you're not alone, and all of these concerns are really, really normal. So I think what I'm gonna do is cap this off here and do a part 2, because I can already feel that this is getting really long, and I don't want people, I don't know, I don't want people to have to like sift through a long video to find their question. So I'm gonna cap this off here. I'm gonna do a part 2 to make sure I answer absolutely everyone's questions. So if you haven't had your question answered here, go to part 2. But really can't thank you enough for your questions, cannot thank you enough for your curiosity and your care and consideration. And you're just the best. That's all there is to it. So wishing you a wonderful day wherever you are in this world. Great blood sugars, straight CGM lines, all of that good stuff. But most of all, and most importantly, I wish you a happy, healthy mind with it all. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in part 2, and I'll see you next time.